into the infarct site. And it was a 15-patient phase 1 study. All 15 patients not only didn't have any problems, but every single one of them improved their function, and they were able to show with imaging at least that there are areas of new myocardium there. Now it's also known that in vitro that extracellular matrix recruits and promotes the proliferation of cardiomyocyte progenitor cells. So whether or not that happened, how much of it happened in vivo is unknown. So I think the problem is the microenvironment.
One quick question, excellent talk. So you told us about decellularized matrices are awash with cytokines and interleukins and membrane-bound vesicles. And in the process of decellularizing an organ for the purpose of making a new organ from new cells, do you think there's an ideal scaffold to use? So time that you use the organ for decellularization, or what type of organ you use for decellularization? And the second part maybe to that question would be, should you or has it been done where a decellularized scaffold has been preconditioned with these factors before you recellularize them?
I'll answer the second one first because that's quicker, and that is that people talked about preconditioning or optimizing them or customizing them, and there have been a couple of attempts, but they've never been able to improve the outcome from the native Mother Nature's version of it. So enriching it with something like VEGF or basic FGF or something really hasn't worked. The second part is there's obviously an organ specificity. The extracellular matrix, so I showed you one example there where the liver matrix had a different, what was the only one of the three that promoted the hepatocyte differentiation, right? So clearly, organ ECM is important, and I think for organs that is obvious. There are other tissues though where it doesn't seem to matter. Skeletal muscle has been regrown in patients with volumetric muscle loss, whether with both urinary bladder matrix, small intestinal submucosa, and muscle matrix, and no one's going to tell the difference in the outcome. Because the matrix itself goes away. It's simply a scaffold, a starting point within a month or 45 days or so. What you implanted is entirely gone. Thank you very much, appreciate it.
So now we go to the panel, so if all the speakers would come up here to the front, and we'll have a panel discussion. So, questions for the panel? So, Steve, can you give us your assessment of timeline? Is this session this morning right in pace with what will actually happen in the science? Or are we ahead of things, or are we behind, or the things we should have been discussing?
I think your opening remarks were right on the money. I think that we're going to recognize more and more how important this overlap in disciplines is, and the role that the different societies and specialists play in promoting organ regeneration. And like I said, actually the organ engineering, I agree with you also that the kidney's the toughest. You're going to have a hard time getting that through. I think the heart's going to be tough as well, because even though you can create these really cool looking little beating hearts in the laboratory, they don't really generate much more than 1 or 2% of the pressure that you need to function. And whereas in the liver, you can put in a little piece and you're going to do some good because it's going to grow, and you can put in a little bit of lung and the patient's going to do better. You can't really do that with the heart. You can't wait long enough for that to grow. It has to work from day one. The kidney, as the pathologist talked about. But shame that two organs, or I think it's almost all engineering limitations, the lung and the liver, aren't receiving the sort of attention and funding that they could, because with the, as you said, 1 out of 10 patients benefit from transplantation, the other 9 out of 10 die, right, or live a horrible existence with the morbidity. So this is something where we can make a terrific difference in the healthcare system if we would solve these problems, these solvable problems.
Any other thoughts, Joshua?
Well, I can speak more from like the heart perspective, just kind of building off of what you're just talking about. I think what makes the heart so difficult to be able to do a whole organ decellularization is just the complexity of all the different micro types of tissue within the heart itself. You have different valves that have different types of structures in themselves. You have the electrical conduction system, which is so important towards pacing and overall function. But I think with the heart, what's great is we don't necessarily, depending upon the disease, might not need a whole organ itself. It could work, and what a lot of the work in the field is building a patch to be able to go over that scar tissue, to be able to rebuild that functionality specifically in the left ventricle, which I think is a little bit more doable, but still a ways away.
So in organoids, are we using organoids because we can't reproducibly re-epithelialize large vessels, or will we still have organoids hundreds of years from now? Do they have an independent importance, or are we just using them because that's what we can do now? And eventually when we're more capable of creating whole organs, organoids will go away completely. So do you think that they will go away, or?
Yeah, excellent point. So I still think the organoid has some unique value, so which are especially for disease modeling. So when compared to traditional cell culture system, primary cells, those cells are much more mature. But in the organoid, it's not just kidding, but organoid is more modified, but it's not the same as native organ. So still some there's some challenges, but still there's some advantages to use organoid system. At the same time, I think it will be helpful to understand the human organ development, and also we can identify those challenges, some disadvantages for organoids, so that we can create better, more functional bioengineered organs.
Right. Edward, you want to ask?
Sure. So, how about we go back to the organoids, something I'm a little bit more familiar with. So you mentioned that you implanted them into animal models. So you were able to get a functional vascular pedicle out of the organoids that allows you to surgically implant them, and how long do they last in the animal? I think the organoid was an organoid dish.
So I think we just need to just carefully think about the policy. We still need animal some advantages, but still, there are challenges to translate findings into care because it's different species. So we just need to be careful to consider all the factors and just here do some experiments, finding something new, and when we interpret those results, just have to be very careful because there's some advantage but also disadvantage. Organoid with the human cells, but for example, we want to study immunological research. So those cells really express those antigens which involve in those responses. We don't know what to evaluate. use those systems and those new systems over time.
Thank you. I'm going to make a prediction. The organoids are probably not going to be useful for in vivo organ replacement, but they're going to be very useful for things like trying to understand development and how we can optimize a regenerative medicine approach for regrowing tissues in vivo. And I think they're going to be very useful for drug screening, for example, in the pharmaceutical industry. They're going to be useful tools. But they're a great example of, the cells of self-assembly, the Onyx work that you described in the late 70s. He showed that if you take epithelial cells and normal fibroblasts, they self-assemble and try to form a bilayer. And so that's pretty neat. But in terms of the engineering part of it, the old approach to tissue engineering, there's never been a single person implanted with an ear, and that was almost 30 years ago, right? And the skin substitutes, Apligraf, Dermagraft, and so forth that we can make in culture, they do not become part of the patient. All the cells in those devices die, but they promote a better outcome. They're very useful. So the paracrine effect and the other things that they do while they're there make a difference. So we really haven't figured out how to, what the signals are that make the cells, I think stem cell therapy is actually ahead, stem cell biology, let me say, is ahead of our understanding of now what makes them assemble in a three-dimensional functional way. And that's, to me, the next rate limiting step.
So is regenerative medicine mainstream now? Or if not, what would it take to make it mainstream? Are there problems with the politics, with the status in society? Sort of. Like, if you say stem cell to the average person, there is likely to think of stem cell fraud, stem cell tourism, as they are of positive things. Most terms don't have that dual meaning of the really negative and really positive all at the same time. So is that fixable? Could we make this something that is less of a foreign thing apart and more mainstream medicine? Or are we already doing that? And are you happy with our progress in that?
I think the terms, I don't want to say misused, but or abused, but maybe misused a lot. It's depending upon, if you live as an academic researcher, you can almost call anything regenerative medicine when a pot of money gets available, saying, we want regenerative medicine for this. Well, anything everybody does all of a sudden becomes regenerative medicine. To the guy on the street, if you say regenerative medicine, 9 out of 10 of them, the first words out of their mouth are going to be stem cells. Oh, you mean stem cells? But as Joshua said, the field is really, it's the cells, it's the matrix, the scaffold, which is what I talked about, and then it's the stimulation or signaling molecules, which was that third component. So I think in many ways it's more, the term is more positive, much more positive than it is negative. I think it's just a matter of being sure that we don't let the definition become so broad that it's meaningless.
And also just to kind of talk about that from a different perspective by kind of bridging this to the clinic itself, speaking as like an engineering perspective, the upscale of the stem cells, the upscale of the tissues in terms of making it available, making it off the shelf as in a way is also kind of a huge kind of bridge that kind of need to be addressed in the future.
Are there questions out there in the audience? I've sort of monopolized things up here at the table. Okay. Well, we have a half-hour break now, and then we come back to talk about artificial intelligence and digital pathology. So, thank you very much.